Dear new Pope, challenges to evangelize the Church in the 21st century. Dear Pope, the Church today finds herself standing at a critical juncture in history, having transcended the early era of evangelization, wherein the central proclamation was the divinity of Christ. Christianity has continually encountered and wrestled with diverse cultures, political systems, and economic structures. These engagements have often threatened to dilute, redefine, or even obscure the original mandate given by Christ in Matthew 28:19 through 20. From the apostolic age until now, the Church has expanded, deepened, and rearticulated the teachings of Christ while enduring waves of suppression, oppression, and martyrdom. The blood of countless witnesses has watered the soil of the Church's mission. Christ himself prepared his followers for such trials, prophesying that they would be hated and persecuted for his sake. His crucifixion, a shameful and public death, remains the ultimate penance and educational moment, serving as a moral and spiritual justification for humanity's redemption. To evangelize, therefore, is not merely to preach Christ, but to embody his presence to every creature, instilling his mission within hearts, thoughts, and actions. Evangelization seeks the full realization of the human spirit's capacity for divine communion. Dear Pope, you are Peter. On this rock he builds his church. Christ is the foundation and not the passing cultures. The cultures will pass away like wind. New one will begin. The church stands firm with the gospel truth, a moral truth. Remember, he told you, do not be afraid. The evolution of evangelization and ecclesiology. The initial method of evangelization, evident from the Gospel of Luke, addressed to Theophilus, emphasized witness to belief. St. Paul's evangelistic efforts, particularly among Gentiles and Jews, further exemplify the dynamic methodologies that would eventually crystallize into the ecclesial structures of the church. Sacramental theology emerged as a key symbol of this transition. Christ's teachings became embodied in the sacraments, signs which simultaneously symbolize and effect the divine grace they signify. The Pentecostal outpouring galvanized this movement, bringing a fervor that swept across Jerusalem and into the Gentile world, ultimately toppling empires and enthroning Christ symbolically at the heart of the Roman Empire. The universality of Christianity, Catholicity, was established, rooting itself firmly from Jerusalem to Rome. The church's mission was no longer hidden, but publicly enthroned upon the world stage. Crisis and fragmentation, historical and contemporary challenges. However, with growth came conflict. From the earliest centuries, the church faced internal and external challenges. The Great Schism and the Protestant Reformation fractured the once unified ecclesial body, scattering believers and weakening the visible unity Christ had intended. In these divisions, the enemy, Satan, ever restless since the dawn of creation, exploited every fissure. As Christ himself warned, evil seeks to infiltrate and undermine the gospel. While he could not silence the good news, he scattered the flock, leading to theological confusion, moral relativism, and political co-option of religious structures. The Renaissance and Enlightenment further complicated this landscape, promoting alternative sources of salvation through reason, science, and technology. Pagan philosophies resurfaced, often under secular guises, challenging the church's authority and undermining its evangelistic mission. Dear Pope, today the church faces an even more insidious challenge: secularism and relativism from within. Vatican II highlighted the need for aggiornamento, bringing up to date, but the internal liberalism of contemporary culture risks watering down the gospel into subjective individualism. Many baptized Christians today profess Christ nominally, but live as practical pagans, detaching themselves from the sacramental and doctrinal foundations of the Church. In our era, Catholicism is increasingly relegated to the archives of antiquated belief systems, particularly in societies once proudly Christian. Evangelization must thus not only address external unbelief, but also re-evangelize a baptized but secularized population. Theological foundations of the Church's origin, Christianity, is not a historical accident. The followers of Christ were drawn from pre-existing religious traditions, which Christ fulfilled rather than abolished. As he declared, "I have not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it." Matthew 5:17. The proto-evangelium, God's promise in Genesis that the offspring of the woman would crush the serpent's head, inaugurated a salvation history culminating in Christ. Before Abraham, Christ was, John 8:58, affirming the eternal nature of his mission. The Church, therefore, did not originate ex nihilo with Pentecost, but finds its genealogical roots among the righteous, from Abel to the prophets. As articulated in Lumen Gentium, the Church encompasses all those throughout history who have lived in expectation of the Messiah. I respectfully diverge from Karl Rahner's concept of anonymous Christians as those practicing non-Christian religions in good conscience post-incarnation. Rather, I propose that true anonymous Christianity refers to those who, before Christ's coming, lived in faithful expectation of redemption without having yet encountered the incarnate Word. Matthew 27:51-53 vividly depicts the cosmic reach of Christ's salvific act. When the veil of the temple was torn, the earth shook, and the saints of old rose from their tombs. This event confirms that salvation bridges both those who awaited Christ's first coming and those who now await his return. Implications for evangelization and ecumenism. Understanding the Church's broad historical and theological foundation reshapes our approach to ecumenism. True religion must center on the adoration of God and the recognition of his incarnate presence. All cultures and religious traditions are called, like the Magi, to recognize and adore the Word made flesh. Until all humanity kneels before Christ, the Church remains a pilgrim, tirelessly laboring for unity in fulfillment of the Lord's Prayer, that they all may be one. John 17:21. Evangelization thus remains both a prophetic mission and a constant summons to deepen the Church's fidelity to her divine mandate. The call for a new evangelization focus on the youth. Given the contemporary challenges, a new evangelization must be urgently carved out, particularly aimed at young people. The younger generations are growing up in an environment saturated by relativism, technological distractions, and ideological confusion. Traditional methods of catechesis and evangelization, while still valuable, must be adapted to the new cultural and intellectual landscapes that young people inhabit. This new evangelization must present the timeless truths of the gospel in a manner that is clear, accessible, dynamic, and deeply rooted in authentic Christian doctrine. It must engage the imagination, intellect, and conscience of young people. using appropriate language, modern communication tools, and vibrant witness. Doctrine must not be diluted, but must be explained in ways that reveal its beauty, coherence, and transformative power. The youth are not merely the future of the church, they are already the church's living present. Evangelizing them is not an option, but a necessity. If the church does not actively engage and form its younger members, the secular ideologies of the world surely will. A missionary spirit must animate the entire church, embracing new methods, fervor, and expressions that help young people encounter the living Christ personally and communally. Only by investing in this generational task can the church hope to renew herself and remain faithful to her perennial mission. Conclusion. The church in the 21st century stands amid a profound crisis, not of external persecution alone, but of internal erosion. Yet, grounded in the apostolic mandate and the eternal promises of Christ, the church continues to persevere. She must renew her commitment to authentic evangelization, resist the dilution of her doctrine, and courageously confront the secularism and relativism that threaten her identity. In a special way, she must reawaken her missionary zeal toward young people, carving a new evangelization that speaks to their hearts and minds. Only by reclaiming the fullness of her sacramental and missionary vocation can the church, the bride of Christ, navigate the tumultuous waters of this era and lead humanity into the fullness of truth. Long live the Pope. Yours faithfully, Reverend Father Christopher Chino Agoha, PhD, Owerri Archdiocese